Hey there, curious minds. Welcome to the Deep Dive, your go-to spot for turning that information overload into those really satisfying aha moments. You're here because you want to make sense of complex topics, like quickly and thoroughly. Today, we're diving deep into something that sounds maybe a bit technical at first glance, but it's absolutely crucial for protecting our digital lives and, the organizations we all rely on. We're talking about the Center for Internet Security, or CIS, controls.
That's right. And you can think of these controls as, well, basically the gold standard blueprint for cybersecurity. Our mission today is to unpack these best practices. We want to explain every part in a way that's hopefully really clear, practical, and shows you exactly why they matter. It doesn't matter if you're thinking about your personal data or, a whole enterprise.
Yeah, get ready for some genuine aha moments, maybe even some surprising facts. Because this isn't just about jargon, right? It's about real-world defense. Defense against digital threats that are, let's be honest, evolving every single day.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning then. What exactly are these CIS controls?
Okay. So at their core, the CIS controls are a recommended set of actions, processes, best practices, really, that organizations can adopt to seriously strengthen their cybersecurity defenses. And they didn't just appear overnight. They were first developed way back in 2008. It was an international consortium of experts, and they've kept evolving ever since. Today, they're stewarded by the SANS Institute, a big name in cyber training, as you probably know. But the updates involve this huge global brain trust, experts from everywhere, government, public companies, different industries, and people in all sorts of roles, too, from the folks on the ground right up to the policymakers.
Wow, okay, that's a massive collaborative effort, not just one group's idea. And I hear there's a relatively new version out, version 8. What's changed with that, and how does it make things, even more relevant today?
Yeah, exactly, version 8. And it brought some pretty significant changes, actually, changes that really reflect the modern digital landscape we're all in. See, previously, the controls were often kind of organized around what type of device you were managing. Now they've shifted. They're much more task-focused, organized by activities. This change actually reduced the total number of controls slightly, from 20 down to 18. And it specifically helps accommodate things like the huge shift to cloud computing, all the remote work now, virtualization. And within these 18 controls, there are 153 safeguards.
Safeguards, okay. What are those exactly?
Think of safeguards as the specific actionable steps. They're the recommendations you take to achieve the broader controls objective. So they're basically the how-to for the what to do.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. So these aren't just like arbitrary rules pulled out of thin air. What's the philosophy behind them? How do they decide what actually makes the cut for these controls?
Right. Good question. They were built on 5 core principles. First, they aim to align with other top cybersecurity standards. Think NIST, HISIA, SOC2, so they map pretty seamlessly, which makes it way easier to integrate them if you're already doing compliance stuff.
Okay, so they play nice with others.
Exactly. Second, they're designed to be measurable, simple, avoid vague language. You can actually check if you're doing them, which is vital for, accountability. Third, and this one's really crucial, it's offense informs defense.
Offense informs defense. What does that mean?
It means the controls are directly based on data from actual cybersecurity attacker behavior, real-world threat intelligence. They're designed to counter what hackers are actually doing, not just some theoretical risk.
Ah, okay. Based on real attacks. That's smart.
Definitely. Fourth, they focus. They help organizations prioritize the most critical problems first. You can't boil the ocean, right? So focus on what matters most. And finally, they are feasible. All the recommendations are practical. They can actually be implemented by organizations of different sizes.
Okay, that last point, feasibility. That raises a big question for me. Are these controls really one size fits all? Because, a small business with maybe one IT person has totally different needs, different resources than some huge multinational corporation with dedicated security teams, right? How do they handle that difference?
Absolutely not one size fits all, and that's exactly where the implementation groups or IGs come in. These are basically self-assessed categories. They help you tailor the controls based on your organization's size, resources, and risk tolerance. There are 3 main groups.
Okay, tell me about them.
Right, so IG1, Implementation Group 1. This focuses on essential cyber hygiene. Think small to medium-sized organizations, maybe limited cyber defense resources, personnel, IT assets. Their main goal is just keeping the lights on, keeping operations going. The data they handle usually isn't super sensitive, and they often can't afford long periods of downtime. It's about getting those basic foundational things right to stop the most common opportunistic attacks.
Okay, the basics for smaller guys make sense. What's next?
IG2. This includes everything from IG1 plus more. This is for companies that probably have dedicated IT staff, supporting multiple departments, maybe with different risk profiles. These places typically handle more sensitive client data, and while maybe they can tolerate short interruptions, a huge concern for them is losing customer trust from a data breach. They have more resources, more at stake, so the controls layer on more defenses.
Right, stepping it up a notch. And a third one.
And then IG3. This includes everything from IG1 and IG2 plus the most advanced stuff. This group is for organizations that have security experts across basically all cyber domains. We're talking pen testers, risk management pros, app security folks, the whole 9 yards, that manage highly sensitive data, probably subject to serious compliance and regulatory oversight. Think finance, healthcare. For these organizations, attacks can cause, well, catastrophic damage, not just to the company, but maybe to the public too. So you see how the controls scale up. Based on complexity, based on risk. It ensures you apply the right level of defense for you.
That is a brilliant way to customize the blueprint. Really helps organizations figure out where to focus their energy and resources. Okay, so let's start laying that groundwork. Build those digital walls. And you mentioned starting with something really fundamental, just knowing what you actually have.
Exactly. That brings us right to Control 01, inventory and control of enterprise assets. Its purpose, help organizations actively track and manage all their IT assets. And I mean everything. Physical devices, laptops, scanners, servers, virtual machines, even assets living up in the cloud. Why does this matter? Well, it's simple. If you don't know what's on your network, you literally cannot protect it.
Can't defend what you can't see.
Precisely. It gives companies a complete, ideally always-on, picture of everything that needs monitoring, everything that needs securing. It also helps visualize how data flows through the organization, helps IT managers prioritize security for the really sensitive devices. Like, if you know exactly which servers hold employee records, you can focus your monitoring and patching there, right, to prevent unauthorized access.
So what does a good inventory look like?
Well, a good IT inventory list would track things like asset description, serial number, maybe warranty expiration, support end-of-life dates, and importantly, who owns it or is responsible for it. Now, one big challenge companies face here is with portable end-user devices. Laptops, tablets people take home, they connect, disconnect. It's hard to get a constant, holistic view sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that being tricky.
And don't forget external connections either. Guest networks, auditors needing access, maybe managed service providers, MSPs, who often need to get into your core network. A key safeguard here is Recommendation 1.1. Utilize an active discovery tool, something to help automate keeping that inventory current.
Okay, so you've got your hardware mapped out. But what about all the software running on those devices? That seems like another critical piece, maybe even harder to track sometimes.
It absolutely is, and that leads us straight into Control 02. Inventory and control of software assets. The purpose here is, again, tracking and managing, but this time, all the software applications. The goal is to make sure that only authorized software is installed and can execute on company devices. And part of that is finding and removing any unmanaged or unauthorized software that might have snuck in.
And what kind of software are we talking about? Just the big applications?
Now, the scope is broad. Operating systems, of course, programming software, business apps, drivers, even open source stuff, and firmware too, that embedded software that comes baked into hardware. Keeping a clear software inventory helps you stay informed about the latest patches, when applications might be reaching end-of-life support, and what extra safeguards might be needed because of software risks. A really critical safeguard example here is 2.6, allow list authorized software.
Allow list. Is that like a blacklist?
Kind of the opposite, actually. A blacklist blocks known bad stuff. An allow list only permits software that's been explicitly approved to run. Everything else is blocked by default. It's a much more secure posture, starting from deny all instead of allow all unless it's known bad.
Ah, okay. Only let the good stuff in from the start. Got it.
Yeah.
So you know your hardware, you know your software. The next logical step has to be protecting the actual data itself, right? The crown jewels.
Yeah.
How do the controls tackle that?
Precisely. That's Control 03, data protection. This one's all about helping organizations securely manage the entire life cycle of their data. From the moment you identify it, classify it, right through to when you finally get rid of it, dispose of it. It starts with identifying, maybe archiving, labeling, and classifying your data. Organizations usually decide their own classification categories, but common ones are like internal, public, sensitive, confidential.
And why is that labeling so important?
Because those labels help you understand the impact if that data gets lost or compromised. Imagine losing your client's most confidential strategy versus, say, a public press release getting out early. Very different consequences, right? Once data is classified, you can develop data mapping, see which applications access data of different sensitivity levels. This then informs your retention rules, your access control lists, your disposal plans. And a huge element here is encryption, using it strategically. You need to secure data both at rest when it's just sitting there on a server or drive and in transit when it's moving across the network. Encryption helps prevent compromise in both states. Key safeguards here include 3.5, encrypt sensitive data at rest, and 3.0, securely dispose of data. Make sure when it's gone, it's really gone.
Okay. Configuring all this,
Mm-hmm.
the devices, the software, protecting the data, that sounds like a huge task, especially because, as you said, out-of-the-box settings are usually built for convenience, not security, right?
Right. You're hitting on a really critical point there. That's Control 04, secure configuration of enterprise assets and software. The purpose is to establish and maintain secure baseline configurations across all enterprise assets, network devices, servers, mobile devices, IoT gadgets, operating systems, applications, everything. And you're absolutely right. Default configurations, they're often designed purely for ease of use or installation, not security. They can contain serious vulnerabilities. Think of it like buying a new house. It probably comes with standard locks. Maybe the windows are easy to open. Default settings are rarely optimized for your safety. It's on you to upgrade the locks, add security film, lock it down.
What does locking it down involve, practically?
Organizations need to assess those default settings, modify them to be secure, and then this is key, continuously review them. This whole process is often called security hardening. It involves things like removing any unused or unnecessary software. Less software means less attack surface. Closing network ports that don't need to be open to the internet. Changing all default passwords immediately. Turning off non-essential services. And there are tools to help, of course. Firewalls, intrusion detection prevention systems, IDSPS data loss prevention or DLP systems, mobile device management, MDM software. They all play a part in securing networks and endpoints. A really practical safeguard is 4.5, manage default accounts. Get rid of those generic, often insecure default logins.
Right, change those admin passwords immediately. And speaking of accounts, managing who gets access, that brings us to accounts and permissions, doesn't it? How do we keep those secure?
Absolutely. That's Control 05, account management. This control outlines best practices for managing credentials and authorization for all kinds of user accounts. Regular users, privileged admin accounts, even service accounts that applications use to talk to each other. Just like hardware and software, accounts need to be inventoried, tracked, and managed. Centralized account management tools are a huge help here. Organizations should also have really clear, acceptable use policies and provide formal training to users on account safety. Things like password requirements, what happens if an account is inactive.
And what about those powerful admin accounts?
Yeah, that's an important distinction. Administrative accounts should be restricted just for specific administrative tasks. If a regular user needs admin privileges for something specific, ideally, they should have a completely separate account just for those elevated actions. Why? It lowers the risk. Their everyday user account, which is much more likely to get phished or targeted, doesn't have those powerful permissions if compromised. And speaking of accounts, two key technologies here are single sign-on, SSO, and multi-factor authentication, MFA.
Right, SSO is convenient, MFA is for security. How do they work together?
Well, SSO lets users log in once and get access to multiple applications, which everyone loves, right? Super convenient. But while it simplifies access, security is actually boosted significantly by adding MFA on top. MFA requires that second factor, like a code from your phone app, a text message, maybe a fingerprint, to really validate it's you. Even if someone steals your password, they still can't get in without that second factor. So a core safeguard is 5.3, use unique passwords, and critically, 5.4, restrict administrator privileges to dedicated administrator accounts.
Okay, so Control 5 is about who has an account and making sure it's secure. But the next big hurdle must be controlling what those accounts can actually do. Right? Just because you have an account doesn't mean you should have the keys to the entire kingdom.
Exactly. That leads us directly into Control 06, Access Control Management. This builds right on top of account management by specifying the type of access user accounts should have, what they can see, what they can touch, what they can change. The core principles here are super important: least privilege and need to know.
Least privilege and need to know. Break those down for us.
Okay. Least privilege means users should only have the absolute bare minimum privileges required to do their specific job role. Just enough access to do their work and absolutely no more. And need to know means they only get access to the specific systems, services, and data that are absolutely necessary for their duties. Not the whole database, just the parts they need. If accounts have more privileges than they need, it creates a massive security risk if that account gets compromised.
So how do organizations manage that? Assigning permissions individually sounds like a nightmare.
It would be. That's why tools like role-based access control, or RBAC, are so helpful. RBAC lets you define roles within the organization, like HR manager, sales rep, system admin, and then you assign the appropriate access levels and permissions to each role, not each individual person. It makes managing access much more scalable and consistent. It also helps enforce separation of duties so no single person has too much control. And just like with account management, having solid processes for provisioning and deprovisioning access is crucial. When someone joins, they get the right access quickly. When someone leaves, that access needs to be revoked immediately and completely. No lingering permissions. A key safeguard here, especially relevant today, is 6.4. Require multi-factor authentication for externally exposed applications. Any system facing the internet is a prime target. Lock it down with MFA.
Okay, so even with all these foundational controls, inventory, secure configs, account management, access control, new vulnerabilities are always popping up in software and systems. How do organizations keep up with that endless stream of new weaknesses being discovered? It feels like a constant battle.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's where Control 07, Continuous Vulnerability Management, comes into play. Its purpose is to help organizations continuously identify and track vulnerabilities within their entire infrastructure. The goal is to remediate them, fix those weak points, before the bad actors can find and exploit them. Like you said, the cybersecurity landscape is constantly evolving. Attackers are always probing, always looking for a weak spot, a way in, so you have to stay proactive.
And you hear about zero-day exploits. Those sound particularly nasty. What are they?
Yeah, 0 days are a serious threat. A 0-day exploit refers to a vulnerability that is basically unknown to the software vendor or the security community. There's no known solution or patch available yet. Attackers who discover these can exploit them before a fix is even developed, leaving organizations completely defenseless for a period. That's why they're called 0-day. There were 0 days between discovery and exploitation. So, to combat this constant threat, organizations need to do proactive scanning, continuous monitoring, and manage the vulnerabilities they find. This means assessing how likely they are to be exploited, what the potential impact would be, and then ranking and prioritizing them for fixing.
How do they rank them? Is there a standard way?
Yes, there are standard classification schemes. You'll often hear about CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, and CVE, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures List. Think of CVSS as like the danger rating for a vulnerability: low, medium, high, critical. It helps prioritize. And CVE is like the official catalog number for every known digital flaw. It gives everyone a common language to talk about specific vulnerabilities. Using these helps figure out the business impact and where to focus patching efforts first. A really key safeguard here is 7.4. Perform automated operating system patch management. Get those critical fixes deployed automatically and quickly.
Okay, patching is vital. But all these systems, firewalls, servers, applications, they generate a ton of logs, a ton of information. How do organizations actually make sense of it all? And more importantly, how do they use it to detect attacks, maybe even in real time?
That is the exact job of Control 08, Audit Log Management. This control is about establishing an enterprise-wide log management process. The goal is to allow organizations to get alerted to potential attacks and help them recover, ideally in real time or close to it. It relies on collecting and analyzing different types of logs. You've got system logs, which track technical events, things like start times, end times, system crashes. And then you have audit logs, which are usually tied to specific users and their actions. They record things like when someone logs in, when they access a specific file, or when they open a certain application.
And why is having all these logs so critical?
Oh, they're absolutely critical for several reasons. First, incident response. Logs act like a digital forensics trail, helping you figure out what happened after an attack. They're also invaluable for legal matters, like e-discovery if there's litigation. They help with accountability during audits. You can use them to learn from past incidents and improve your processes. And sometimes, there are data retention requirements for compliance reasons you legally have to keep logs for a certain period. So the process needs to cover the entire life cycle of these logs, from collection and storage to eventual secure disposal. And organizations should definitely set up alerts for things like failed login attempts or attempts to access resources without the right privileges. These can be early warning signs of an attack in progress. A core safeguard here is 8.2. Collect detailed audit logs. The more relevant information you capture, the better your chances of detecting and responding effectively.
Makes sense. More data, better visibility. Okay, finally, for this foundational set of controls, let's talk about probably the most common way attacks actually start: email and web browsers. It feels like almost every major breach or incident, no matter how sophisticated it gets later, often begins with a dodgy email or a malicious website click.
You're absolutely right. That's Control 09, email and web browser protections. This control provides recommendations on how to detect and protect against cybercrime that's attempted through email or just general internet browsing, often by directly targeting employees. Email clients and web browsers give attackers a direct line to your users. It makes employees really vulnerable to social engineering tactics, tricking them, and also delivering malicious payloads like viruses or ransomware.
What are the biggest threats here? Phishing.
Phishing scams are huge, yes. And also, business email compromise, or BEC, is rampant. That's where attackers might impersonate an executive, maybe the CEO, and try to trick someone in finance into wiring money or giving up sensitive data. They often target executives or people who control valuable data or financial resources. So, to protect against this, the control recommends using policies and tools that enforce things like URL filtering, blocking access to known malicious websites, often using DNS filtering. Also, blocking certain risky file types from being downloaded or opened from email. Restricting users' ability to install potentially shady browser add-ons. Implementing email authentication protocols like DMARC, SPF, DKIM. These help verify that an email actually came from who it says it came from. And of course, having good anti-malware scanning on your email service is crucial. A key safeguard here is 9.5. Use DNS filtering services. This can stop users from even reaching malicious sites in the first place, cutting off the attack before it even starts.
Wow. Okay, that's a really powerful set of foundational defenses we've covered already, controls 1 through 9. But you mentioned there are 18 controls in total. So the CIS controls clearly go even deeper, right? Covering things like fighting malware more specifically and preparing for those worst-case scenarios. It's really clear this is designed to be a truly comprehensive approach, not just hitting the basics.
Indeed it is. Moving into the next set, we get into more advanced defenses and also dealing with the consequences. Let's look at Control 10. Malware defenses. This one specifically helps companies prevent the installation and, importantly, the propagation of malware onto company assets and across their network. Malware, as you know, is a broad category: viruses, worms, spyware, ransomware, trojans, lots of nasty stuff. And it can cause substantial damage, stealing intellectual property, destroying critical data, encrypting everything for ransom, grinding operations to a complete halt.
And are there new challenges in malware defense? Is it just about blocking known viruses?
Oh, it's definitely evolved. A really growing challenge now is something called living off the land, or lateral attacks. This is where attackers try to minimize their footprint. Instead of bringing in their own obvious custom malware tools, they use an organization's existing legitimate tools and applications against itself.
Wait, using your own tools against you? How does that work?
Exactly. Think about tools that IT admins use every day for system management, like PowerShell on Windows or WMI, Windows Management Instrumentation. These tools are powerful, they're trusted, they're already installed everywhere, and they often have broad access. Attackers compromise a system, maybe through a phishing email, and then instead of installing easily detectable malware, they use these built-in tools to move around the network, steal data, disable security controls, all while looking like legitimate admin activity. It makes them much harder to spot. There was a really chilling example, the Family Practice Medical Inc. case, FPMI. Attackers found an open port, got in, and then used the company's own WMI interface again, a normal system management tool, to disable security software, remove files, and extract hundreds of thousands of sensitive medical records and payment details. And they did it undetected for quite some time.
That is terrifying. The real aha. There isn't just about malware. It's realizing that your own trusted internal systems can become the biggest weapon in an attacker's hands if they get misused. You have to monitor your own legitimate activity for suspicious patterns. So if you can't prevent every single attack, especially these sneaky ones, what's plan B? You have to be able to recover your data, right?
Absolutely critical. That brings us to Control 11, data recovery. This control is all about establishing the processes for data backup, testing those backups, and having reliable restoration procedures. The goal is to allow organizations to effectively recover their company assets and data back to a known good state, ideally from before the incident occurred. Data is such a critical resource and it's always vulnerable, not just to ransomware, which gets the headlines, but also simple human error, accidental deletions, system misconfigurations, even natural disasters, power outages, floods, fires.
So what are the best practices for backups? Just copy files somewhere else.
It's a bit more involved than that for robustness. Best practices include automating the backup process. You don't want to rely on someone remembering to do it. Using offsite storage is crucial. Keeping backups in a different physical location, maybe even a different geographical region, protects against local disasters. Encrypting the backup data itself is also important. You don't want someone stealing your backups and having easy access to everything. And perhaps most importantly, regularly testing your backups. The recommendation is at least quarterly. You need to confirm they actually work, that you can restore the data successfully. Ideally, you do this by restoring files into a separate testbed environment so you don't mess up your live systems, because having backups is useless if you find out they're corrupted or incomplete only when you desperately need them. So key safeguards are 11.2, perform automated backups, and 11.4, test data recovery.
Test your backups. That sounds like a really solid advice. Don't just assume they work. Okay, behind all these digital assets, the software, the data, there's the actual network infrastructure connecting everything. The routers, the switches, the firewalls, the Wi-Fi. How do the controls address managing and securing that incredibly complex web?
That's the focus of Control 12, Network Infrastructure Management. This control establishes procedures and tools specifically for managing and securing the company's network infrastructure. That includes both physical devices, the firewalls, routers, switches you mentioned, and also virtual network components, plus wireless access points. It's about making sure the foundation of your network is solid and doesn't have easily exploitable weaknesses.
What are the key actions there?
Key actions include things like keeping your network architecture documentation and diagrams accurate and up to date. Sounds basic, but it's essential for troubleshooting and security analysis. Having critical vendor contact information handy. Monitoring for network components that are reaching their end-of-life support date so you can plan upgrades before they become unsupported security risks. And again, continuously identifying and remediating insecure default network configuration settings. Plus, fixing misconfigured settings, getting rid of insecure protocols, and patching outdated network device software or firmware. There are commercial tools available that can help evaluate your network configuration against known security rules and best practices. A crucial safeguard here is 12.3, securely manage network infrastructure, ensuring those core devices that run your network are locked down properly.
Okay, so your network infrastructure is securely configured, but you need to watch it constantly for threats, right? Because the bad actors, they aren't sleeping.
Absolutely. That's Control 13, network monitoring and defense. This control establishes processes for continuously monitoring and defending the company's network infrastructure against both internal and external security threats. Even if you have state-of-the-art security software, it often needs fine-tuning for your specific network environment, and new attack techniques pop up all the time, so continuous monitoring is absolutely critical.
What kind of attacks are common at the network level?
Well, two really common network attack types are denial of service, or DOS attacks, and again, ransomware often involves network compromise. A DOS attack is where a perpetrator basically floods the company's network with so much traffic that legitimate users can't get through. It renders the network useless, like creating a massive digital traffic jam. Ransomware attacks, as we've touched on, often involve attackers gaining access to the network, moving laterally between systems, and then deploying the ransomware to block access, demanding payment, and maybe threatening to release stolen data if the ransom isn't paid. To combat these, organizations should really use centralized event logging and alerting mechanisms. Often this is done through SIEM tools, security information, and event management.
SIEM tools, what do they do?
SIEM tools pull in logs from all sorts of different security devices and systems across the network: firewalls, servers, intrusion detection systems, endpoints into one central place. They analyze all that data, correlate events, and help security teams get a single pane of glass view, making it easier to spot anomalies or potential attacks that might be missed if you were looking at logs individually. Other important tools include NPS network intrusion prevention systems, which can actively block malicious traffic. NGFW next-generation firewalls, which offer more advanced inspection capabilities than traditional firewalls. We mentioned DLP, data loss prevention systems. Earlier, they watch for sensitive data trying to leave the network. And EDR endpoint detection and response systems, which provide deep visibility and threat detection on individual computers and servers. All these help with monitoring traffic flow and detecting threats.
That sounds like a lot of sophisticated tools and expertise needed. What about smaller organizations?
That's a great point. For smaller organizations that don't have the resources to run their own 247 Security Operations Center, or SOC, or a Network Operations Center, NOC, outsourcing these monitoring and defense functions to a managed service provider, an MSP, or a specialized managed security service provider, MSSP, is a very common and often effective solution. A key safeguard, regardless of size, is 13.1. Centralized security event alerting. Get that holistic view of potential threats across your environment.
Okay, we've talked a lot about technology, devices, network software. But what about the people? The human element. Isn't it often said that employees can be the biggest vulnerability, sometimes without even realizing it?
They absolutely can be, and that is why Control 14. Security awareness and skills training is so incredibly vital. This control guides organizations in establishing a security awareness and training program. The specific goal is to reduce cybersecurity risk by influencing employee behavior in a positive way. Because, yes, uninformed employees can pose one of the greatest risks. Whether it's falling for external social engineering tricks, making an internal mistake due to human error, or sometimes just simple negligence like using weak passwords or clicking on dodgy links.
So what does good training look like? Is it just that annual compliance video?
Hopefully not. Effective training shouldn't be just a one-time check-the-box annual event. It needs to be frequent, relevant, and engaging. The messages need to resonate with people in their daily work. Think about discussing the impact of recent real-world data breaches. Talk about the rise in phishing scams, maybe specifically around tax season or holidays when people are more vulnerable. Explain the dangers of using insecure public Wi-Fi networks. It's about educating staff so they can recognize unusual behavior or suspicious requests, teaching them how to handle organizational assets and data safely, making sure they understand the risks of insecure networks and devices. And critically, they need to know how and when to report potential incidents or anything suspicious they see. Don't be afraid to speak up. A core safeguard here is 14.4. Train workforce members to recognize social engineering attacks. These attacks prey on human psychology, so awareness is the best defense.
Training the people, absolutely essential. Now, many organizations rely heavily on third-party service providers these days. Cloud hosts, payroll companies, CRM providers, marketing tools. The list goes on. How do you make sure their security measures are up to snuff? Because a weak link in your supply chain could compromise everything, right?
That is a huge concern, and it's addressed by Control 15, Service Provider Management. This control helps organizations develop processes to evaluate those third-party service providers, especially ones that have access to sensitive company data or maybe manage some or even all of a company's IT functions. The risk, exactly as you said, is that these third parties might not adhere to the same security standards as your own organization. They could potentially become a significant weak link in your overall defense posture, a backdoor in.
So what's the solution? How do you manage that risk?
The solution is to establish a really robust management process that covers the entire life cycle of your relationship with that service provider. It starts with thorough assessment before you even sign a contract, due diligence. It continues with ongoing monitoring throughout the relationship, and it includes secure decommissioning processes when the relationship ends, making sure your data is returned or destroyed, and their access is fully revoked. Organizations should ensure their contracts include very clear security requirements and expectations. And tools like SOC Audit Report System and Organization Controls Reports can be really useful here. These are independent audits of a service provider's controls, and they can give you valuable insight into their security posture and help you assess the risks of doing business with them. A key safeguard is 15.1. Establish and maintain an inventory of service providers, and 15.5, assess service providers. You're essentially vetting their digital security just as carefully as you would manage your own.
Vetting your partners. Makes total sense. What about the security of the software applications themselves, especially custom ones developed in-house, or even big applications acquired from vendors? It feels like the actual code could be a massive hidden vulnerability if it's not written securely.
It absolutely can be, and that's the focus of Control 16, Application Software Security. This control establishes safeguards for the entire life cycle of software, whether it's software you acquire off the shelf, software that's hosted for you. SaaS, or software you develop in-house. The goal is to detect and resolve weaknesses in the software before they can be exploited by attackers. And this is getting increasingly complex today. Software development life cycles, or SDLCs, are much shorter now. There's a lot of pressure to release features quickly. Plus, applications often mix existing code libraries, maybe open source libraries with new custom code. And those existing libraries can introduce their own vulnerabilities if they're not kept up to date or used properly.
What kind of weaknesses are common in software?
Oh, vulnerabilities can stem from lots of things. Flawed application design, simple coding errors, poor authentication or authorization logic, failure to properly validate user input. Common specific exploit types you hear about include things like buffer overflows, cross-site scripting, often called XSS, SQL injections, and race
Okay,
conditions.
can you briefly explain those? They sound technical.
Sure, quickly. A buffer overflow is like trying to pour a gallon of water into a pint glass. If a program tries to write more data into a memory space than it can hold, the extra data can spill over and overwrite other important memory, potentially crashing the system, or worse, allowing an attacker to run their own malicious code. Cross-site scripting, XSS, is tricky. Imagine someone manages to inject a small piece of malicious script into a legitimate website, maybe in a comment section. When you visit that page, your browser runs the script, and it might try to steal your login cookie for that site or redirect you somewhere harmful. It attacks the user through the trusted website. SQL injection is when an attacker finds a way to sneak database commands into a website's input field, like a search box or login form. Instead of searching for shoes, they might inject a command that tells the database to dump all the customer usernames and passwords. They're basically injecting their own commands into the database query. And race conditions are subtle. They happen when the outcome of a process depends on the unpredictable timing or sequence of multiple threads or operations. An attacker might try to manipulate that timing to gain an advantage, like maybe accessing a resource before the security check completes. Attackers can leverage these kinds of flaws to escalate their privileges, bypass security controls, or compromise sensitive data and assets.
Okay, those sound dangerous. How do you prevent them?
Well, prevention involves integrating security throughout the entire software development process. This includes things like adopting secure design standards from the beginning, conducting secure code reviews where other developers look over the code specifically for security flaws, and integrating various forms of security testing, static analysis, dynamic analysis, interactive testing directly into the SDLC pipeline. Don't wait until the end to test security, build it in. One area that can be a bit of a blind spot is software as a service, or SaaS, platforms. You often lack direct visibility into their development processes, so you need to ask them about their security practices and request those SOC reports we mentioned earlier. An innovative approach some larger organizations use is setting up bug bounty programs. They basically offer cash rewards to ethical hackers and security researchers for finding and responsibly reporting vulnerabilities in their software. It incentivizes finding flaws before the bad guys do. A crucial safeguard here is 16.0. Train developers in application security concepts and secure coding. Give your developers the knowledge and skills they need to write secure code from the start.
Building security in, not bolting it on later. Makes sense. So we've covered a huge amount of ground on prevention and defense. But as we know, even with all these measures, breaches can still happen, sometimes will happen. It really feels less like a matter of if and more a matter of when for many organizations. So how do they prepare for that inevitability? What do they do when an attack actually occurs?
That's exactly where Control 17, Incident Response Management, comes in. The purpose of this control is to establish a comprehensive program to effectively detect, respond to, contain, and recover from potential cybersecurity attacks or incidents. It's absolutely built on that when, not if mentality. Assume it will happen and be ready. And the legal and regulatory context is critical here too. Laws like HIPAA for medical information or GDPR for EU citizen data have strict requirements about notifying individuals and regulators if their data is breached. Non-compliance can lead to hefty fines and serious reputational damage.
So what are the key elements of a good incident response plan?
A good plan needs several key elements. You need to designate key points of contact, establish a dedicated incident response team with defined roles and responsibilities, develop clear communication plans who needs to be notified internally, like legal, PR, executives, who needs to be notified externally, customers, regulators, maybe law enforcement, and how will that communication happen? And crucially, organizations must periodically test their incident response plan. You do this through exercises like tabletop simulations or even more involved technical drills. This helps assess how effective the plan really is, identifies gaps or confusion, and builds muscle memory for the team. It's like a fire drill, but for a cyber attack. Conducting post-incident reviews after any real event is also essential. Learn from what happened, what went well, what didn't, and use those lessons to improve your defenses and your response plan for the next time. Key safeguards include 17.1, establish and manage an incident response process, and 17.6, conduct routine incident response exercises. Practice, practice, practice.
Practice makes perfect, even for something you hope never happens. Okay, final control, number 18. After putting all these defenses in place, the configurations, the monitoring, the training, the incident response plan, how do you really know if your defenses are strong enough? Seems like you have to push them, test them under pressure, almost like an attacker would, right?
You absolutely do. And that leads us perfectly to the final control, Control 18, penetration testing. The purpose here is quite specific: to test the overall strength and sophistication of your organization's cybersecurity defense system by simulating actual attacks. Pen testers actively try to find and exploit weaknesses, just like a real attacker would. Now, this is different from the vulnerability management we discussed back in Control 07. Remember, vulnerability scanning identifies potential weaknesses based on known signatures or configurations. Penetration testing goes a significant step further. It attempts to actively exploit those identified weak points, and maybe find unknown ones, to see how far an attacker could actually get. Can they bypass controls? Can they escalate privileges? Can they access sensitive data? What additional damage could be done once that initial foothold is gained?
So it's like hiring ethical hackers to try and break in.
Essentially, yes. These are often called red team exercises. A red team of ethical hackers simulates the specific tactics, techniques, and procedures, the TTPs, that real-world adversaries relevant to that organization are known to use. For instance, remember that case, First Payment Network Inc., the credit card processor with the new biorecognition payment tech. They specifically used a red team to test if someone could realistically forge a fingerprint that the system would accept, or if they could somehow bypass the code that required the biometric validation. They were literally trying to break their own system in realistic ways. The typical penetration testing process involves several phases: discovery and scanning to find potential targets and vulnerabilities, then exploitation, attempting to actually break in or gain control, then post-exploitation, seeing what else can be accessed. And finally, reporting and remediation, detailing the findings so the organization can fix the holes. For larger organizations, especially those with significant cybersecurity risk, it's generally recommended to perform external penetration tests at least annually. A key safeguard here is 18.1. Perform periodic external penetration tests. It's the ultimate reality check for your defenses.
Wow. Okay, that was an incredible deep dive into all 18 CIS controls. Thank you. From just inventorying your assets and software, protecting your data, securing configurations, all the way through to training your people, managing vendors, responding to incidents, and even simulating real attacks with penetration testing. It's crystal clear these controls offer a truly comprehensive roadmap, a blueprint for building robust cybersecurity for you, for your organization. And it feels like more than just a technical checklist. Hearing you explain it, it sounds like a profound psychological shift almost. You're encouraged to proactively think like the attacker, to understand their playbook, not just reactively patch known holes. It really is the ultimate stress test for your digital fortress.
Indeed. And while the full list of 18 controls and 153 safeguards might seem daunting at first, remember the implementation groups. Understanding these controls, especially when they're tailored to your organization's size and risk profile using the IGs, provides such a powerful foundation. It really is all about continuous improvement, building resilience, and maintaining that proactive defense in what is undeniably an ever-evolving and often hostile digital landscape.
Absolutely. So after this deep dive into safeguarding our digital world, here's something for you to think about. What's one area of your own digital security, maybe your personal security, or that of an organization you care about, that you now feel compelled to explore or maybe improve based on these insights we've discussed today? Definitely food for thought. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive.